Hi guys, welcome to Mahogany Honey, the podcast. Today we have two special guests from HeyGirlDreamer. Well, I want to make the correction that it is GirlDreamer. And we'll get into that much later on. But my two special guests, the co-owners and owners of GirlDreamer, Kiran and Amna. Hey ladies.
Hi.
Hey, hi. We're saying hello to them and we're so thankful that they're here with us, and we're going to be talking about everything pretty much that led them up to the point of starting GirlDreamer, and just touching on cross culture and so many different topics, so much more. And I can't wait to jump in. So ladies, feel free to introduce yourselves.
Okay, great. So my name is Amna. I'm 29. As Alexa mentioned, I'm the co-founder of GirlDreamer, and I run it with co-founder Kiran and also BFF. So we've been best friends for 14 years. So yeah, I'll hand it over to Kiran.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Kiran and I'm the other co-founder and the other BFF of this duo team that we have here at GirlDreamer. Yeah, we started GirlDreamer 5 years ago, but been best friends for 14 years. Yeah, and it's been a crazy journey and ride up to here. And we'll just let you know that it was an accidental journey. So there should be lots of interesting things that come out of this conversation today.
Wow, accidental journey. I want to get into that. Why accidental?
Amna, how far back do we take?
Yeah, do you want the short version or how much time do we have?
Yeah, because the whole podcast could be just this story. So
yeah, I think we can keep it short.
Okay, so
yeah, so after college, which I think is it high school in America up till 18?
Yeah.
So we have universities and college. So you can say after college would be like the 2 year, the start, the associate's degree, the first 2 years after high school. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that so? Yeah. Ours is college for us is 16 to 18 years old. Is that the same?
It would be. I would say it probably would be. Yeah. Right. Because high school ends earlier for you guys, probably. For us, is up to 18. So yeah, college.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Well, that's good to know. So after school, Kiran and I went to college, and that's where we met. Actually, we met on the first day.
Okay.
And after college, I was apparently supposed to go to university, because my parents wanted me to get a degree. And I think in their head it was like, you get a degree. Obviously, once you graduate, you're going to get married, and people favor those women who have a degree. I thought that was crazy, because I feel like I could get married without a degree. But maybe for them it was different. So I did go to university, but only for 1 week. And whilst I was there for that 1 week, I realized this is not the place for me. And Kiran in that time was taking a gap year, and she wanted to figure out, well, I'm sure you'll explain later, Kiran, but for her, she was figuring out what she wanted to do. She did want to pursue something in the medical field, but I think she wanted to take that time to figure it out. And in that time, we had a discussion, and we were like, what do we want to do in our life? We have so many similarities. We're best friends. We're really passionate about female empowerment, and uplifting other women that look like us as well. What can we kind of do with that? And I think I was struggling to have the conversation at home with my parents and family that I no longer want to be at university. And Kiran was advising me and guiding me. Look, how long are you going to fake going to university every day? This is going to go on for years. Your degree is for 3 years. You can't do this for 3 years. You need to have that difficult conversation. Yep. And I just felt like I had nowhere to kind of go outside of my friendship with Kiran. Who could I go to talk to gain advice? And I think it was one night in 2012, I think in January, we had a conversation over the phone, and we were talking for hours, and it went into past midnight, into the early hours of the morning. and we were talking about legacy, and it just went really deep very fast, and we were talking about legacy and our life choices, and how our parents came to this country, and we were talking about all these different things and what we wanted to do for the next generation now.
Yeah.
And I think it's in that moment where we realized we wanted to do something that wasn't traditional, that wasn't kind of going through university, getting married straight away, and we wanted to do something that felt different to us but also left an impact and an impression on the world if we were no longer here. And I think at this point I'll hand over to you, Kiran, to walk us into GirlDreamer.
Yes, at that moment, still didn't know it was meant to be this though. So we went in actually to start volunteering in the charity sector and started mentoring teenage girls of color. And it was through that mentoring we started to set up after school programs to help with their, because these were girls that were from, you know, the country's most deprived areas. They lacked that ambition and, you know, desire for what could be their lives in the future. And so we started this mentoring thing and was like, no, you know, you can be anything, you can be everything, you can be, but if you haven't grown up around an environment that fosters that, then you don't believe that. And especially, you know, girls in particular, there's a different kind of cultural and societal pressure to be a certain way. So when we finished that voluntary year, it was just like, this was amazing, this is the calling. It was that moment where it's like, this is it, this feeling every day is what we want. And I say accidental before because at no point was that meant to be, and we will set up our own thing and become those people. It was just meant to be like, I just want to do that. Who can I go to? What organization can I join? What charity can I be a part of that will allow me to continue this mission? But at that point, we couldn't find anything in our city or just anywhere around us that was doing that specifically for women who look like us. And so one day in 2016, we went on like the British government, like UK website where you register a business, and we just registered. And we just put an application form and it said, congratulations, you're now, you now own this company. And we were like, great, now what do we do? And we were like, so no business experience, no financial, no resources, no money, no anything, like literally nothing, but this idea of this is the feeling, this is the passion, this is the goal. I guess we'll just have to make it up from there. And for the past nearly 5 years, that's what we've been doing.
Wow. That sounds like my journey. When I finally did the LLC business part, how you're talking about it. And then it was like, congrats. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I just maybe gave birth to a business.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that.
So
just one day you're this and the next you're that, and you don't quite know how to kind of, I don't know, take that in or understand what that means.
How was the feeling? How did you feel in the moment? Were you like, oh my God?
To be honest, we didn't do anything with it for the first 6 months. We kind of registered and then let it sit there. And only about halfway through the first year, someone reminded us something about funding and your annual accounts. And I was like, oh, this is real. We have to submit something at the end of the year. Okay, this is real. So it took 6 months for us to understand what we had done. So officially GirlDreamer probably didn't start until then. And when we did, then we were like, oh my God, okay, this is amazing. I think when we got our first bit of funding to run a program and and we had money in the account, then it felt very real.
Yeah, I think Kiran, you always mention this, but we tend to work backwards. So in my mind, it's like you're supposed to have all these plans ready and in place, and then you would go and register a company. But we just registered it and did nothing with it. And then, like Kiran mentioned, 6 months later, realized actually things are expected from us in 6 months' time, and we didn't have anything in place. So I think then it became very real. Okay, we're actually business owners now. We own a company.
And Google and YouTube became the other best friends in this equation. And it was a case of, let me just Google what that means. Let me make sure I understand that. Let me watch this video. Those were our mentors and teachers throughout that journey.
And still very much is for me. I don't know about you.
We're telling the same story here.
I know you're telling my story too as we go, which is beautiful. I love this. Um, so to continue on, I'm very interested, just so the listeners can know, what is your cultural background, ethnicity? What do you identify as?
Amna?
I'm British Pakistani, so my parents came here from Pakistan. Wow, I think in the 60s. So yeah.
I'm British Indian. My parents were actually born here, though. They were born in the same city that I was born and live in. And my grandparents were from India. So they came. So I think, does that make me second generation? I always get the generation confused. But yeah, yeah. So we're British Indian, and British Pakistani.
Amazing.
And Alexa, I haven't asked you actually. What is your?
Yes, I'm Dominican. So Dominican American. Yes. Well, I guess to say it backwards, similar to Amna, American Dominican, because I was born here. I was actually born here, but my parents are Dominican. They're from the Dominican Republic and they immigrated here, and I would be first generation.
Yeah.
No,
That's so cool. I don't think I've ever met a Dominican person.
Nor me.
So thank you for this call.
yes, absolutely. Are there any Dominicans in London? Now I'm wondering.
I feel like in
England.
yeah, I feel like in London there would be. In Birmingham, I've never come across anyone.
I've never met anyone in. So the second largest city, Birmingham, is a pretty big multicultural city. But from, if I think of my schooling and just work history, I don't think I've ever met someone from that part of the world, like any. So yeah, so I think once I went to America, I met someone who's Puerto Rican. Now you're Dominican. And I'm like, it's growing. I'm finally meeting them, but not here. I have to go to America to meet.
Yeah, amazing. So similar to Puerto Rico, we are a Caribbean island. We're also a Caribbean island that was colonized by the Spaniards. So we speak Spanish. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. I'm going to make sure I save some of those questions for the end, because then we're going to get into a whole conversation about culture, and then I want to start asking about food, and then yeah, it's going to go in a different direction.
Listen, I'm here for it. We can even have a part two. I'm here for it all. This is what I love to do. And so because, the listeners want to know, and I also want to know, what led you to begin GirlDreamer? What led you guys to initiate it as a business or a brand?
Yeah, I think what Amna was saying about that kind of natural journey of trying to find out what that purpose and passion and legacy should be. When we finished volunteering in the charity sector, and actually we volunteered for a youth and education charity that was started in America, and then they brought it over to England, and then we stayed there for a bit. And it was during that kind of period when we were thinking about, okay, what's next, what comes next, it was like, it's got to be something that captures this, but because it doesn't exist, we might have to be the ones to create it. And if we can help and support other young women of color who are having this journey of trying to navigate things like purpose and passion, where do you go with a dream where culturally that's not what is expected of you, and society says that's not for you either. We were those people, and it was like, didn't know where to go to kind of get that guidance, get that support, join something that's firstly said that's okay, and then secondly said this is how you work through that. And because it wasn't there, we were just like, maybe we could just be the ones to do it. Maybe it could turn into nothing, or it could turn into something, but let's just try. And yeah, trying in 2016 has led to us still being here in 2021 and talking to you. So we set GirlDreamer up in a way that, so it was a non-profit. So GirlDreamer is a non-profit, and we thought about what we wanted to do, even with like money we make as a business, and it all very much kept leading back to put it back into the community, keep growing things in the community, allow for our community to be uplifted and empowered, and let's make those change at really like local grassroots levels. We know what it's like. We are those women that we're supporting. It's not separate in a business capacity. Like we are the business because of that lived experience, I suppose.
Amazing. That's amazing. So what would you say makes your nonprofit different from any other ones that may have a similar mission? What would be the difference?
I think personally, from my perspective, it would be the fact that we lead by lived experience. So everything that we put on at GirlDreamer, whether it's a workshop, an event, or a session, a retreat, or anything, it comes from a place of genuinity and an understanding of we've been here, we understand what this is like, or we're even going through things simultaneously together because we work with millennial and Gen Z women of color.
Yeah.
We are millennial women of color, so we understand the needs of the community directly. Whereas in the third sector or in nonprofits, you generally have people serving a community that they're not from.
Right.
So sometimes there's that feeling of, do you genuinely or truly understand the needs? And I feel like we definitely do.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Do you guys have like any story that sticks out that you would be like, this is worth telling, and this is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing this. Now I remember why I'm doing this.
That's
oh my
such
gosh.
an interesting question.
Yeah,
maybe potentially we could revisit, but there is one. And I was at a gala event and I met someone there. So when I was volunteering at the charity, part of the role at this gala was for us volunteers to kind of hand out drinks and welcome people at the reception. And it's there where I met my current mentor. And he's been mentoring me for the past nearly 5 years now. And when I say mentor, it's very informal. And I think it's the guidance that I've learned from him that has been so amazing and so insightful. And it's in that moment where it was a long day. This gala started at like 6 p.m. and we had served the whole day at schools. And then we got on a train, went down to London, carried all these heavy bags, and I was shattered. But obviously, when it's 6 p.m. and the doors open, you have to have your game face on and like be presentable. I feel like you're nodding along, so you know what I'm talking about. And I can't even explain. I was so tired. I had no capacity to have conversation, do small talk, or none of that. But being in the role I was, I took it seriously, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And literally within 10 minutes, this man walked in, American as well, and he was one of the investors and supporters of this charity. And we just got into conversation, and when I look back at it now, I was just being authentically and genuinely myself. And I think it's through that conversation that we became connected, and our relationship grew in a sense of like mentoring and business support and stuff. And to this day, he just advocates for both of us, our work, what we do. And I think that stuck with me. And it always reminds me, no matter how tired you may feel or how long the journey is, and what you're up against, always think of where you want to be. And it's in that conversation he asked me, he was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm volunteering. And then he was like, what do you want to do after this? And this was literally in exchange of a drink, and he was just meant to take this drink and go. So yeah, I always think of that when I feel like I'm low, or I'm like, why am I doing this kind of thing? I think of that bigger picture.
Amazing. Yeah, it's always like the one moments that you didn't think, the very unexpected, they catch you offhand. You're just not even prepared, and you're like, oh, I remember now.
Yeah. Yes.
Alexa, do you have like a defining?
Do I have a defining
that moment? Yeah.
Yes, I did. Matter of fact, the second segment, the one that you guys will be a part of, which is the economic and racial equity segment, because right now I believe we're on wellness and relationships. Um, and so for season one, I was sitting down and I was pretty much speaking to one of my guest speakers. And I was probably very exhausted. And I remember like one of the questions that I had asked, and it was one of those questions that I try to put in there intentionally, but I didn't know how in depth it was going to be. Every response is different, right? I never get the same response, and that is where I'm like, okay, I think I definitely believe I'm in the right path. And the question was, which I'm going to ask you next. Funny enough, is what was the catalyst moment, the breakthrough moment? And she basically told me how she was at an event with her company. She was working at a company and they were at a conference away somewhere. And she was in the midst of doing like 100 things at once. And while she was trying to do 100 things at once, in front of everyone, her boss, her leader, her director, you can say, called her out in a very disrespectful way. Like his tone was very disrespectful to the point that she contained herself and didn't respond, went to the bathroom and just like cried and was like, I do not deserve to be treated this way. I don't care how stressed out a person may be. Like, I do not deserve to be like regarded in any way, shape, or form like this. I've had it. Like, that was like her catalyst moment, right? And for me, my catalyst moment was not being heard at work, especially when it came to ethical matters. There was like something very that went against my values at my last job, where I was like, you know, they're really not respecting me as a person. And I think that it trickles down and eventually shows. And I was like, it will trickle down to the people that you're serving, right? And so when I felt that way, I had to step away because I felt like I wasn't being heard, I wasn't being seen. And if I'm not being heard or seen, that's where I'm like, okay, it's going to trickle down to the people I'm serving eventually. And I don't want the people that I'm serving, especially that deserve to be the most, like, to be heard and seen. And we don't think about it often at times, but the way that our directors lead us is how we lead others. And so, yeah, what were your breakthrough moments? Hopefully it wasn't similar to mine, but
no, I can definitely see it. In that moment comes where you just say, no, this isn't it. This isn't for me. And that's not how I want things to be. Like you did, like those are such powerful moments because it reminds you like you decided to choose you. And I think for me, there was like two types of one was like at the very early stages of GirlDreamer, like just around that time and before, was like Amna said, I was meant to go into something medical, and I was meant to be on one side of my family, I was going to be like the first girl to go to university, and and I had the apparent brains, and I was meant to make a whole generation and proud as you do. And for me, at the very last minute, and I mean, had my results and stuff in the summer, and then I was meant to like start to then just say no, that's not what I want to do, was a huge like deal, and not one that's taken lightly, because it's like, in our culture as well, if you give girls freedom and you allow them to have these choices and stuff, it's that danger of then they're going to go against the grain. And I don't know if in similar in your culture, but our culture doesn't necessarily celebrate going against the grain. You want to stick within a well-respected career, and you need to make sure you're holding your whole community on your back, and you don't you're representing everyone, not just yourself. And so the decision not to do it, And I remember like my parents they were okay with it. Thankfully, like I've got a really supportive immediate family, but like I said, we're part of a community, and they have siblings and I have grandparents, and they don't see this stuff in the same way. So I remember going to a wedding, and everyone was really excited to know what I was going to do, and like they were like ready to be like, I'm so proud of you. Then they found out I wasn't going to go, and that I was going to do something in like a charity capacity. And I don't know, for them, it must have felt like they thought I was going to be a charity case now. And I was like, no, I am not charity. I am going to do, but if you go from that to that, and it was just this disappointment. And it was this kind of looking at my parents and going almost like, where did you go wrong? This is why we don't give girls that. We think we shouldn't give them that level of like freedom and power, because this is what can happen. Like it could have gone so well, like look now. And I think at that moment I was like, no, I'm gonna take what that moment, and I could feel it for my parents, and I was just like, I'm gonna make them so proud, and I'm gonna make prove all those people so wrong, and show what, you know, girls from my background, whether it's, you know, freedom related thing, whether it's a cultural thing, whatever that thing is that tells us we're not supposed to be here, I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to go back to someone's wedding one day. It won't be mine. I'll go to someone else's. When I go to a family function, and I'm going to say to them, when they say, what do you do? I'm going to proudly say, you know, I'm a social entrepreneur. I run a nonprofit, I think. And if they don't understand what those words mean, because they don't, a lot of them are, you know, my relatives are from India. They haven't heard words like this before. And I'm going to confidently and proudly say, this is what I do. This is who I help. This is the impact I've had on the world. And after the pandemic, I'm waiting for those moments to come so I can go back to everybody's party and tell them just who I am and how right my parents were for kind of having my back.
Following Kiran's one, I feel like there's many negative ones, not negative ones, but I feel like there's ones where there's a definite struggle, but there's some great positive kind of breakthrough moments as well. So I'll kind of give you one that's in the middle. So in 2020, just before the pandemic hit, like literally 2 weeks before, we had the great opportunity to meet Meghan Markle and Prince Harry in Buckingham Palace in London. So we definitely took that opportunity, and we were like, yes, we are going to be there. And the journey up to London was like miserable. It was raining, typical British day. It was cold, and then I also got my period as well. And when that just happens, it's like, why? I have this thing where anytime something amazing or phenomenal or special happens in my life, for some reason my period wants to join me, and I'm like, nobody invited you. It's a me thing. Like, let me enjoy this moment. Anyway, so we stayed the night, and then the next morning we were supposed to have this event and meet them. So I was in excruciating pain, and I have like very difficult periods sometimes as well. So again, in excruciating pain, putting on that game face, getting ready in the morning, and you know, you're only going to meet the prince and princess, like, so you have to come correct. So again, it was very cold, and I'm allergic to the cold as well. I always need it to be very hot, warm, sunny. That's when I feel like I'm thriving. But it was the beginning of March, so that was not going to happen. And yeah, so I'm sitting there with Meghan Markle, like just shook her hand, and I'm casually just one person away from her, talking to her face to face. And it's just in that moment where I realized, by the way, my hands were sweating, I had dry mouth, I was so nervous, and it was managing all those like sensory feelings as well, and the emotions going with it, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I'm sitting here right now. And then trying to act cool as well, because you can't act how you're feeling, because then I would be like a hot mess on the floor. And it was in that feeling where I just remembered everything it took for me to be in this room right now. Culturally, societally, personally, professionally, every single thing. I almost realized, even ancestrally, like what my great grandparents and nans and grandmas had to go through my parents had to come to this country and all the hardships that they faced for me to kind of sit in Buckingham Palace and casually have a conversation with amazing other young people, and of course mentioning Harry and Meghan as well. And I just thought to myself there and then, if at any moment I ever wanted to give up on this journey, and there have been many moments where I felt like I can't do this anymore, I need to throw in the towel, I don't have any mental capacity left, I don't have physical energy to wake up and turn up to work today because I just feel depleted and drained. I felt like this is the moment where I'm going to remember forever, every time it gets hard, to refer back to this moment and remember that you made it. And where I grew up in Birmingham, and I know I live in the UK, and for my cousins in Pakistan, for them that's like I've won the lottery to live in such a great part of the world. But I grew up in a very inner city area where it was very deprived, and I went to a school that was very problematic, and people from that school don't get to have moments like this. And those girls from the community where I grew up don't get to have moments like this. And I just felt exceptionally just honored in that moment. And I really took it in whilst I was sitting there. And it's just been a moment for me to be like, after this moment, I'm going to go back to Birmingham and do whatever I need to continue this journey. And when it gets hard and when it gets difficult, I will always refer back, but I will never give up, kind of thing. And that's been that moment for me.
Amazing. Both of your stories. And I'm seeing a theme of breaking family like culture a little bit, kind of going be the black sheep, right?
I think as women of color as well, when you start something as crazy as this, you kind of take the community with you, sometimes willingly and sometimes they just come. So you have to have that on your back, knowing that if I'm representing somewhere as a Pakistani woman, I'm almost representing all Pakistani women. And that's a lot of pressure sometimes, because you don't want to speak on behalf of the entire community. But sometimes when you're up on those platforms, you're almost seen as you're doing that. So And
I want to say something really interesting enough. Anytime hearing your stories, especially your story about you ending up to getting your period in one of the most remarkable moments, right, can I just tell you that I'm a strong believer that anytime you're going to do something super impactful, right, something inconvenient really happens. No, and I'm telling you this, I'm almost thinking about this interview as being it, because I'm having technical difficulties and my ring light just went out. I'm like, this is great. This is an impactful conversation. This is why this is happening. You know what? And I'm just gonna roll with it. I'm just gonna roll with the punches. You just gotta roll with the punches. And so people need to know that is part of the journey.
Oh, absolutely. I can think of all the great moments we've had. Something felt very like something happened where you almost like, I'm going to laugh or I'm going to cry. And it's those moments. And like you said, then you end up having the best time, or there's a great turning point or something. But it rarely ever happens in this really pretty like way, like, you wake up and you stretch and you feel great and the sunshine. It's not that. It will usually be the gloomiest day, or you have to do like the photo shoot of your life, and then you'll wake up and something on your skin breaks. It's always those things. But I think, like you both said, like if you just keep going and just keep trusting that process, what comes of it is like beyond what you could have hoped for. And I suppose it's just where you place the focus. Like Amna placed it, like when we were with Meghan Markle, it was that this is historic. She's a woman of color here. She's representing. It's never been that way before. And we're also here, and where we grew up, that's never happened before. Like, this is what we're going to choose to focus on and hold. And there were definitely a million things that were going wrong in the background behind then.
Very much so.
Don't worry about the ring light, Alexa. You still look great.
You've got that natural light coming in from there. It's amazing.
it's actually really gloomy outside. So I'm glad that whatever's coming through is there. I appreciate it for what it is right now. And so to continue in these moments of being the Black sheep and just, cultural differences and all the barriers that we come across, I want to know, what is your definition of cross-cultural? When someone says cross-cultural, what do you think about when you hear the word?
I feel like, is it like the fusion of cultures, like living in or being in a situation, an environment or place where it's multi-diverse, like there's so many different people. What do you think, Kiran?
Yeah, I think of it like that, and in like that, I suppose like us, identity, our roots are not from here, but we live here, and this is, the how we identify, and the kind of cross balance, I suppose, of being those two things. That's how I think I see it. Alexa, what about you? How do you?
Yeah, for me is pretty much collaborating, uniting, bridging, being the liaison between specifically women of color for me. So that's where I reference it, and when I found you guys and I came across your page, and it was so funny. I think I shared the story with Amna. I think it was someone who left a comment on underneath my page because I was asking for guest speakers, and they were like, "Hey, check out GirlDreamer," and I was like, "Okay, will do." And I like found your page, and I was like, "Okay, yes." This is exactly what I am looking for, and what I'm trying to aspire. So I felt like our missions were very similar, right? And so that's why I always like to ask that question and know what it means to you guys, and how is it that it comes across for you in your entrepreneurship ventures.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, actually, because I think there's a danger with, I think, business and entrepreneurship when you're starting to like assimilate, and you really want to. So for us at the beginning, especially, it was trying to be the version of, a business owner that you think you're supposed to be, and a lot of that requires you to leave your your personal and cultural side like out of the business boardroom, essentially. When you go into that, it's like separating those identities, and that's really hard to do, especially if you're really connected to that part of yourself. And you think it's really strange because it's like, clearly, you wear it, you look different in that room, so everyone's aware that you have different parts of who you are, but there's an expectation almost that you don't bring that side, you keep it strictly professional, whatever that's supposed to mean. And I think for me anyway, it's how do I still balance that cross-cultural understanding of life that I have, and represent and be me and be authentically me in that space, and avoid trying to kind of be this version because I think that's what I'm supposed to do because it's going to get me more business or help me grow to the next level. And that's a really interesting one because I feel like people do feel, so I suppose it's things like code switching, right? How I talk is going to have to be different when I enter that space, or how I walk, or how I dress, how I eat, how I drink, and having all those things at the back of your mind as a person of color, or whatever other protected characteristic you have, like being that version of yourself in that space is, I think, quite tricky to navigate in the beginning, especially until you get to a point where you're just like, you know what, I don't care, this is me, I'm going to bring me, and yeah, I'm going to accept all of me in these spaces. And I think when you do that, it's a really powerful shift. What do you think, Amna?
Yeah, I think as you were talking, I was going to say, when you said you get to a point where it's like, I don't care. Now I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking maybe you can only say that after you've become a little bit established, at least, because in the very early days, if you come in with a, this is who I am, I don't care, you're still dealing and operating in a world that does care. So very easily and quickly you can get shunned away. But I think definitely 100% what you said, I agree. from everything, being at networking events and there's just alcohol to drink and you don't drink alcohol, and then people are like, why don't you drink alcohol? And all those difficult questions. And also once, Alexa, Kiran and I were at a networking event, and I thought, I'm going to do an experiment today, because nobody was coming up to us and talking to us because we didn't have a drink in our hand.
Oh, wow.
So then I was like, and I had a J2O, and I think, Kiran, you had a Coke in your hand. So I just picked up a glass of champagne and I just held on to it because I don't drink alcohol. And I kid you not, like 4 people just felt, I don't know what it was. It's almost like they felt comfortable to kind of approach us because, one, we look brown, we are brown. So it's firstly, and we were in spaces where it was heavily like Caucasians, white people, and a lot of them were drinking. And maybe it's that thing where it's like, oh, if you're not drinking, it's almost like you're not one of us. And I think that's difficult as well, because you're just standing there sad in a corner with a drink in your hand, wanting people to come and talk to you. So then I was like, okay, maybe I should go and talk to people. But it's almost as though they can't, I don't know, like there's nothing to bond. And I'm like, I'm genuinely another person like you. I'm literally another person like you. We have so much in common on a human level, even if we don't on a personal level. Surely there's something you can talk to me about. But I don't know, but I've always felt as though there's this feeling of whether it's intimidation or nervousness or just not bothered. But I think the best way I can describe it is, I'm not sure if you've seen Ugly Betty, but when I watch Ugly Betty, that character for me sums up what it's like. You know, Betty, she's from like Queens, and her background, and then she's going into Manhattan to work, and like it's there's nobody who looks like her in this big fashion building, and she's very out of place. She's a complete misfit. She does not fit in, and she's trying to find her way here, and she's trying to be herself at the same time, and it's very difficult. She's mocked, she's constantly made fun of. They make fun of her name, the way she looks, the clothes she wears, the food she eats. And I think that's the best way I can describe how it feels for me, is I very much relate to the character of Ugly Betty.
That's so interesting. That's very interesting about that little experiment that you did. Interesting enough, here that happens as well, where like, you know, most events revolve around like alcohol being the social lubricant, right? It's almost like this is what we do in order to be vulnerable and let our inhibitions down so we can have authentic conversations. And it's like, is this possible? This is possible regardless, you know, whether or not, if I'm comfortable in who I am, and I know who I am, right? It's okay for me to have a conversation without like a social lubricant, I suppose, right? And I wanted to get a little bit into what you said about being in a room and feeling almost out of place at times, of like being predominantly around one certain race and you being of another. It's interesting how you could either feel like a misfit, or at times you could be overly embraced where it becomes overexploited. It's almost like you're what's on display. And I've seen that happen as well. And I've seen both sides, because I used to work at art organizations, and it's almost like whoever is the, let's say, artist of the event, or that happens. And I get it, because you're like the main entertainment piece, but it's like, okay, hopefully, let's say if that person happens to be of color, there should be other people in the room celebrating him or her, whoever the artist is as well, instead of them feeling as if like, okay, I'm here, I'm the entertainment, you know, it's almost like I have to perform, like I'm here, and I have to put on a show. And so it's like either too much pressure on you or none. And it's so interesting that you made that connection with alcohol.
Yeah, definitely. And I relate so much to what you just done and the little dance you just did as well. Because I think sometimes I've also been at events where I'm the only like person of color, let alone woman of color. And like it's almost like they want to take you around on show to each of their friends and their little groups and kind of meet this person. And they want everyone to kind of shake hands with you or learn a bit about your. So I've shared a little bit about my journey with one person and then almost been taken around the room to share it with everyone else because it was so interesting and different. And that for me is so jarring because I'm like, why am I literally walking around the room like a clown?
Yeah.
And repeating myself.
Yeah.
Like what I'm telling you is sad. It's not happy. Why
it's
is this
exploiting that sadness. It's because it just fits right into like a stereotype or a version of us that they want us to be. It confirms like all of those things, especially if it's room with like, you know, rich people, that it definitely happens then when it's like, you know, charity sponsor events and galas and things like that, like quickly feeling like a commodity in those spaces happens really fast. And you know, in those like types of environments, especially if your business journey is one that comes from like a very personal space and you're using things like lived experiences, obviously there's going to be times when you're going to share vulnerable things because it's a part of, you know, who you are and what you do and why you're here. But it's that balance between that being and you saying that from a place of power, from like you, like I'm choosing to share this because I want to, you making me go around the room to tell all your rich friends my sad life story is not, the power's not with me then, and I'm not choosing to do that. And I think that can be difficult, and especially in your beginning stages, because you do want people to invest in you and sponsor you and, you know, work with you. So you're just like, oh, I don't want to be difficult, whatever that means, but equally I'm not that comfortable telling a random room of 100 people, you know, that moment, unless I want to. But yeah, that line gets very blurred very quickly.
I think I found the highlighting moment of this unintentionally. See. No, but it's very, it feels, it could be predatory, I guess.
Yes.
If overdone, and not in a genuine way. But if it's done obviously in a genuine way where people genuinely want to get to know you or not, it's like, hey, it's okay. We can have this conversation without feeling like we have to like have a drink or having to like force a conversation on, you know, like hopefully it happens organically as we're here, enjoying ourselves and getting to know each other. So
yes,
being mindful of that. And with that in mind, because you never want to make sure that you stray away from your mission too, being mindful of these spaces and making sure that like, hey, is my message coming across of my mission, and the services that we do. And so that as well. So when you go into these spaces, what is it that you guys want to make sure that it comes across and conveys?
I think when we're in those spaces, like we make it very clear that, you know, so we explain the mission. We say, you know, we support the personal and professional development of young women of color. We're trying to tackle social inequality, trying to help them pursue their dreams. And it's what you said, it's like keeping that kind of mission so strongly in mind that even if a conversation happens and you feel like, oh, let me just kind of stray off into that way, because it's how that person perceives you and the direction they want you to go in, it might not always be best for you. And it's like holding that thing and saying, it's almost like having your points right. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to build better representation in this. We're trying to see that women of color become this. So it's like keeping your, you know, your key performance indicators or your impact goals or your missions and values all in your head whilst trying to talk to all these different people, and, you know, people potentially wanting to support you or understand you, but they can be doing it from their perception, like their version of you. And so when, I think for me, especially when I'm in those spaces, I'm like, okay, don't let yourself get carried away. Remember why we're here. Allow yourself to remain in that position of truth and of power. Like hold your own. You can do it in that space. And I always remind myself of that when we're there, because it's really easy to kind of just get, I don't know, get a bit caught up in the hype of it all.
Yeah. And so what are some of the great things you would say that you guys are doing right now that you genuinely would want people to know, like, hey, this is what we're doing right now, and this is like so important to us?
I think at the moment where we are focusing heavily about being in the situation that we're in with COVID, and just the whole world is experiencing the same thing. We're trying to adapt to it as fast and as efficient as possible without losing that quality of our work. So with our work, we do tend to have initiatives and programs that originally ran in person.
Yeah.
And we like to really create a vibe and a feeling when we have our women of color come together. Whether that's an event or a session or a workshop, we want it to be the best feeling. So when they leave, when they walk out, they're feeling uplifted, they're feeling inspired, and they're feeling like, oh my God, I just spent the best 2 hours of my life here at GirlDreamer. And I think carrying that same energy into a digital world where, how do you create a vibe over a screen, especially when sometimes it's without video and it's like a downloadable resource or a workshop that you can participate in. Sometimes it feels like it's you can't engage properly. So I think at the moment we are having a heavy emphasis on how do we go digital with our work to reach all the women of color, not just in Birmingham, but nationwide and internationally as well. And also what their needs are. Keeping it relevant as well with their with being in a pandemic and the situation of people losing their jobs and all sorts. How do we stay relevant? Right, Kiran? Am I?
Yeah, and kind of taking the collective learning of what we've done over 5 years and how differently it's gone and the journey it's taken and led us to here. One thing we realized when the pandemic happened, that the kind of overarching things that we talk about or are trying to support with, they do go beyond our country. It is true for women of color everywhere. And like at the moment, our programs do have women from like up to 10 different countries on them at all times. And that feeling of like, this is everywhere. This is when we can really do something with this. So at the moment, we're trying to create GirlDreamer to be this always accessible, always there kind of space. Doesn't matter like where you're from or what time it is or where you are in your journey, there's something here for you as a woman of color. And whether that's directly speaking to your professional development, directly speaking to the kind of personal side of you, or if it's directly speaking to your need for community at this time, we're building those kind of 3 key things into something that should launch soon and be really, really special. And from what we've done research wise, there's nothing like it that exists in the world yet for women of color. So if we can continue to build on this platform, and it's taken us throughout the pandemic to really hone in on what that looks like and what we want it to do, but there should be a pretty cool digital platform created by us that if you're a young woman of color and you're looking for those 3 things I mentioned, then that should definitely be the space and the place for you. And I just like shamelessly just plugging that in and letting that seep into everyone's mind now.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep you updated as we go along.
No, it already sounds amazing because funny enough, you guys are my first international interview.
Oh really?
So cool.
Yes.
I feel extra special now.
I know, I feel honored.
You guys are. So this is amazing. This feels amazing. And I think that you guys are manifesting even without it being intentional. So
yeah.
I feel like what you're trying to create is also pouring into others without you noticing. So the fact that I found you in itself, would you say serendipity? I don't know.
Absolutely. I love serendipity. Yeah, that's exactly what we call this moment.
So I love it. I really do love it. Would you say it would be one of your strengths? And what are some of your strengths? But I think that's probably, I would say.
As in what are GirlDreamer's strengths or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting question. I think one thing, Kiran, feel free to chime in here as well. I like the fact that we are by the community for the community.
Yeah.
Again, I mentioned earlier, being women of color, leading for women of color. I really like that fact and that aspect of GirlDreamer, because personally, I feel like I really understand the needs of our community. And even when I don't, I'm actively listening and prepared to understand what those needs are. Because from some angle or some point, I can understand the kind of united struggle that we have, or the different cultures we derive from, or, you know, what makes us who we are. And I feel like we're very willing in that aspect to ensure that those needs are met.
Yeah, in fact, our so we're heavily steered by our advisory board, and that is made up of women of color from all around the world, like all women of color board. And yeah, so our work in a community, and that helps us to also get out of our own potential echo chamber. You know, we are constantly doing and being in this one way, and so we try to make sure that it's not just from us personally, like GirlDreamer is collectively something. And so we do rely on our community to feed that, all that's kind of changes and cultures and ideas and things that go beyond us, and feed that back into us. Because I think one strength we have is that, and I know it sounds really simple, is that we are an organization. A lot of people who do what we do are amazing, you know, platforms or unofficial kind of community groups. Being an organization allows us to have this certain amount of power and responsibility that we can influence, and we can do things in spaces that if we weren't necessarily like registered to be in those spaces, if I couldn't be a part of GirlDreamer and allow me to do this in the charity sector, in, you know, the nonprofit sector in England, then I couldn't go into those spaces and into those rooms and advocate and influence in the way that I can, because we are, you know, and I can hold that power, and it can change the funding system in ways in this country, because we can be funded. We're part of that picture. A lot of the times it can be part of the problem, but we can bring ourselves as a part solution to those areas, and change the kind of dynamic of what this sector looks like in this country anyway. And yeah, there's a certain amount of power in a good way that comes with that. I think lastly as well, one of the strengths is that lived experience does drive us, and in a world where I think the value on people's lived experiences is growing, and we're kind of understanding that, oh yeah, maybe people who have experienced that should lead on that. It kind of makes really simple sense, but it's taken the world a while to get on board with that. But that means that what we're doing, we know it's for a purpose. We know who it's for at all times. We know why it needs to be there, and we know what it feels like. So when we design something, we can take that whole process through. We're not just outcome focused, because we know from start to finish what that's like. And so we can bring those kind of unique, more tailored nuances into our work.
That is what we strive for on this platform as well. Lived experiences is our niche.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, you know, at times when we were, you know, throughout our journey in this conversation, the journey of this conversation, I should say, I was almost inclined to be like, where is the celebratory moment for us? Did we have one? You know, because I do believe that we deserve to be applauded for being so multifaceted.
Yeah.
Because we are. In order for us to have gotten to this level where we are now, and I mean, or to this specific space that we are in and what we're creating, to even be an entrepreneur, I mean, I'm sure that at one time you guys were probably owner / digital person, probably social media strategist, like you were
like 11
still just
different roles.
definitely. Like the photographer, the social media manager, the
The events
invoicer, the
manager.
admin. Yep, been
Yeah.
there, done that.
The
Yeah,
caterers to your own
absolutely.
event. Yeah, absolutely. If you're like, Mom, can you help me make this food for my own event, please? Yeah, we've done all of those. Absolutely all of them. And so sometimes it's really weird calling yourself, a CEO, because you're like, am I a chief executive officer, in the same way that when I look at other organizations and I see, white business owners in a certain way, like own that position and that right and only get to be that. And I do see, I think nearly every woman of color I know that owns a business is never just, at least at the beginning, just the role that's down on paper. There is a whole behind the scenes role. Like if we actually all put what we do, it wouldn't just be that of that. It would be really long.
I would say like program manager, content creator, social media strategist.
Yeah, it's more like A to Z, not CEO. It's just everything.
Absolutely. And I wanted to bring that into the conversation because I'm like, it needs to be known. A lot of people come in and they want to be entrepreneurs, and they don't realize at times until they're in it that you're like, oh, I'm all of these things. So I think I'm glad that it's being said, because it hasn't been said yet on the podcast. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's a very real thing. And I think sometimes people don't like to, share it too much or be that public, because when you're trying to start your thing and get serious about it, so you might think that it can sound like a negative, or that you don't have X, Y, and Z in place, that maybe you don't then appear a certain way, or you think it might be detrimental to you, and you're trying to embody that role. Of course, like everyone's trying to embody the thing they came here to do, but I think sharing the fact that it's not so straightforward is a strength for any business owner, because it just lets other people know who could one day potentially be, who we all are right now. It allows them to be like, you don't have to be perfect, and you can just be you, and you can also be here. It doesn't necessarily require exclusive people to be this way. And I think the more sort of human we get about it, and the more we laugh at these things, can let others know that it's okay. It's encouraging, I think. Absolutely. Especially for fellow perfectionists out there, because I don't know if anyone else is one, but I am definitely one, and I need to hear that someone else felt that way or did that, because it really validates. And for a perfectionist who can't get themselves to just give it a go, or to just try, or to move with it, hearing those things, I think, is really valuable.
Yeah, and I think to add to that is also like accepting failure and welcoming it as well. We recently spoke with someone about how we honor failure at GirlDreamer, because we've had tons of experience of failing, and I don't think we're shy from it, or shy of it as well. And I think when our perspective changed on failures, when we realized that it's not failing, it's feedback, and it's telling you something that either needs to change, or it's not telling you you're not good enough for this. You know what I mean? So we need to welcome that more in our entrepreneurial journeys as well, because entrepreneur, like the second definition of it, is to just take those risks, fail, get back up, and try again, kind of thing, until you've gone through all those peaks and valleys of that journey of being an entrepreneur. And I think failure is definitely a part of that.
Yeah, it's like it becomes like a top 3 skill that you need to almost adapt after a while. Like,
I think that should be on people's CVs as well. Like,
it should.
Great at failure, and great at getting back up as well.
Absolutely.
I love that. I might just take that.
Yeah, you totally should.
Alexa, what's your view with like failure and things? Like, how comfortable are you with that?
And I think I will start with when I took the leap of faith of like, you know what? I'm not going, because it came to a point where when I left my last job, I was so exhausted and, like I said, burned out, and I needed a minute. The universe was like, girl, we just want you to take a minute and get to know yourself. But I was like, but but I don't wanna. I need the next paycheck. Like, I need to survive. Like, my family, I have my ancestry on my back. Like, I have my community on my back. And the universe just kept being like, this is me. And the universe was like, sit down.
Yeah. In words of Kendrick Lamar, sit down, be humble.
Like, you said it best, literally. And so I had to sit with myself, and that was major for me, because that was the first time I had to sit with myself, and I was like, who are you? Who is this 28-year-old? I don't even, how did you get here? How did we get here? Is this even what you want to do? Like, and it sounds so cliche. I get it. Like, and for some people have been down this road and path, but for me, it was new, and it's always going to be new for you. And I think we need to give ourselves a little bit more empathy on that end, that it's always going to be new for you, even if it was new for someone else and someone else already went through it. That's them. You need to go through yours. I was like, fuck.
100%.
That is so important.
100%.
So important. You can never know what it truly feels like until you experience it firsthand. That firsthand experience, it makes all the difference. It really does.
Yeah. And so I was there while I was sitting with myself. I was like, okay, so what now? And I remember you asked me in the beginning, we were speaking before we started recording. You said, what led you into starting the podcast? And pretty much so, it was those moments of like sitting with myself, kind of like forcing myself to go a little bit against the grain. I was almost afraid to even have interviews or even have these discussions, because I was talking about very raw topics and very real things that were happening to me as I was living in the moment. And I was trying to captivate it as it was happening, and it was almost, I felt like it was too much, if that makes any sense. I felt like it was too raw. It was too real for people to digest. But I'm happy that I didn't stray from it. I didn't like decide to be like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Good for you.
Yeah.
We're so happy you did too, because we wouldn't be here having
being your first international call. Let's just bask in this.
So you're right. And these are the moments, the aha moments that I was saying that happened, where you're like, how do you know you are where you're supposed to be? So with that said, last question for you guys, because you guys have been so great so far. Where would you say you are now in your journey with GirlDreamer?
I feel like it's such an interesting point in the journey now, because we've almost come out of startup phase and we're now in scale up phase. And I think making that transition has been so nerve-wracking in an exciting way. So we've been quite apprehensive, actually, because it's almost like it's been very difficult, and then you almost get comfortable, and then it's like success starts coming, and then you get comfortable with this position that you're in and this space that you've created. But then actually the next phase of business forces you to leap over, and then you're thinking, hang on a minute, everything I've just done here is amazing. Like, I don't want to kind of exert more energy and jump up to another phase now. But it's also exciting because it's like what awaits us there. So yeah, it's weird because there's so many emotions involved, and it's almost celebrating everything that's kind of taken us from day one to 5 years. And now thinking, okay, how do the next 5 years be even better, and keep bringing in that success for personal reasons, ourselves, for the community. How do we keep growing the community in a holistic way, and also growing our team as well, because from day one it's just been Kiran and I, and then a couple of years in we brought on someone else just to help us volunteer. Then we managed to pay her, and then we were like, okay, this sounds great, feels great, like we have support, we're able to pay her. How do we keep like duplicating this and having our team grow. And now, you know, we're in a fortunate enough position to have, I think, our 9th team member, Kiran, join us last week. So it feels really exciting right now. Kiran, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's this point of, like Amna said, we got comfortable and now we're in this place where we're kind of getting uncomfortable again to get comfortable again. Because there's a part in your journey where like you figure that out, and then like honestly you kind of just stay in it and not plateau in a bad way, but just in a comfortable way. And when you're ready to take that next leap, it's like all those uncomfortable, nervy, feary type feelings all over again. But this time it's not to like start all over again, but it is to start something again.
Yeah.
And that feeling of starting again, like I said, the scale up, like where we take GirlDreamer now, like making this digital transition, like having a team and having to like manage that, and then again there's like financial implications that come with that. Yes, it's great when you grow, but you also have to sustain that growth. And now focusing on sustainability so that GirlDreamer is here in another 5 years. We're at that point in our journey where it's like, okay, this is real. In 5 years will be like a full decade. That's crazy to think in your head, when you were just like two best friends who grew up here and you never thought you'd be these people, and now you're these people. Like sometimes you gotta be like, oh my god, that's so scary. Like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just so and so from so and so area. Like I'm not qualified to be in this space.
And then I think in that moment you just think, I'm going to quit this. I just want to be a low-key job
right.
somewhere.
I want to go off grid.
Put a baseball cap on, look down, and just I
don't want, and because it's exciting and scary all at the same time. And I think we're in that space where we're about to really own this story, and we're really about to take this journey in a direction where we've taken all the learnings and we're going to fully steer that ship now. We're not just like part of like, you know, the captain's crew. Like we are the captain now, and to take those reins is about to feel very different. And we can feel it every day. You kind of wake up and you feel this kind of pressure and excitement in your heart all the time. And I say we're there. That's where GirlDreamer is. We're
like
at
an upgrade.
Yes, we're just doing the downloading and the installing and the rebooting, and then it's about to all happen.
I love that. It almost feels like therapy, because I don't know. No, hear me out. So funny enough, I'm actually like, I encourage anyone who is going through being an entrepreneur or whatever, or just going through any life transitions right now. My journey has guided me to try out therapy. And when you're in therapy, you're constantly like discussing different and unpacking different parts of yourself. And it's like, finally, when you're like, oh, I know myself, there's like more. Something happens and you're like, and then there's more. And you're like, oh my goodness, when does this ride ever stop? Where do I get off the train? And it's like, no, you decided to get on the train.
Yes.
And here you are.
It's absolutely that. It doesn't stop. You just get better at managing certain like parts of it until there's a new part that you have to learn to manage and get better at as well. So like you said, it's just like a train ride that never ends. It can temporarily stop at the station, but you're not getting off. You can just breathe for a second when they open the doors, but you're not getting off, and then you gotta go again. So yeah, it's like that.
Oh my goodness, this conversation has been so like enlightening for me as well, because I've been unraveling some things as well too, and I never thought that. Not that I never. It always happens. I always say this in every interview. I'm like, you guys bring out something, and I hope I do the same for you guys. Of like,
absolutely,
you know,
you absolutely do, and I think that's the space that you've created is so important, because it's allowing us to learn from each other, like so far away physically, you know, you being all the way in America and us in England, but it's like something in this conversation at this moment we were both meant to hear, well, we were all meant to hear from each other and learn from each other. And you know, thanks to you, we had the opportunity to. So you kind of leaning into your calling and honoring that has, you know, from us and all the other women you've interviewed and had these conversations with, like that's what you were meant to bring to the world, and you're doing it.
Oh my goodness, you guys are too. Thank you. All the struggles, all the tears
Yeah.
of the unknown.
And very like random side note, but I love your accent, by the way. This is so fun
I
for me.
know, right? I said that to her last time.
I was saying that about you guys. I'm like, I love it. Like, I love to hear like the different accents and whatnot. So thank you so much. Vice versa. And I hope that, you know, like I always say, whenever you guys ever feel this is an open platform, once you come in and you're invited, feel free to, you know, come on back. I would love to have you guys ever come back and discuss whatever other topics you would love.
That would be amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, the platform's here. And any resources or links you guys would like to share, or any takeaways you want to leave the listeners with before we go off into the abyss of our journeys.
Yes, the abyss that we're so familiar with. I'll do the social media plugin if you'd love to keep up to date with our journey, what we're doing, our community as well. And to join the community, if you're on Instagram or Twitter, we're at HeyGirlDreamer. And a lot of people tend to call us HeyGirlDreamer, which innocently fine, but I think we called ourselves that because GirlDreamer was taken across all social media. Yeah. So we are now HeyGirlDreamer, but called GirlDreamer. So yeah, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter, or our website, girldreamer.co.uk. And I think for now, you can subscribe to our newsletter that we share regular updates bi-monthly. And in the meantime, Kiran mentioned that super secret thing that we're working on. So if you're subscribed to the newsletter or following us on socials, you'll definitely know about that as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add for like takeaways, and I think we've definitely gone through some like key ones, but just as I suppose as a bit of a roundup, I really want to stress the thing about not being afraid to fail. We should be more afraid of not giving things a go. Like if you feel like it's what you're supposed to do, there's a reason for that. And to explore that even as comfortably as you can take it, or as safely as you can take it, in whatever circumstance you're in, like test the waters at least. For us, there's always a reason for everything. And if we didn't kind of like honor and listen to that calling, you know, didn't go to university and didn't pursue the paths that were set out for us, or we thought was the only way to live life, like I said, we wouldn't have had these amazing experiences that we did, and tested it in small ways. And that's okay. Just honor yourself in some way, always. I think that is something really big that I've had to learn. And again, I always shout this one out for the fellow perfectionists out there, because I know that's a huge barrier for so many people, is that there's never a right time to start, but you are always good enough. And that is like understanding that never a right time, you're always good enough. So it's like now is it. Yeah. And I'll go into too many and get all philosophical, so I'll stop.
No, you're good. And embrace your identity crisis.
Oh my God, yes. There is, you know, it's just, embrace all of it. Anything that feels like a blunder and a mess. And I think like embrace the mess. It's supposed to be a messy journey. Even if people don't show you that and they don't tell you that, it is a messy journey.
I feel like there's beauty in the mess as well, because
absolutely.
Seeing something that's perfect, okay, wow, like, okay, great, it's perfect, but where's the nitty gritty, like the raw creative side of it that was, I don't know, like a big explosive mess that had been refined. I think beauty is seeing it all for what it is, and to acknowledge that more and respect that.
And the last one I can think of is, and I learned the hard way, was it's not personal. A lot of the things on this journey are not personal. You know, if something didn't go my way, like in a business perspective, I'd also be like, it's because I'm not good enough and I didn't do this well and they think I'm like this. And it was all of these things. And when I really had to look at the bigger picture, I was like, it's not because of that. It was a whole different set of reasons, but it was never personal. And that is a really good way to navigate any like setbacks or failure. because we'll take it on our own shoulders. Like you apply for this thing and you get a no and you think it's because I'm the world's worst person, but it's not. It could be whatever on their side, and it's not about you in the nicest way. Like we have to learn and accept that, and that I think allows us to keep going if we realize that it's not always personal.
Definitely. I think a recent one for me has been finding joy in anything
God, yeah.
and everything. I think being young people, especially millennials and Gen Z, when we're looking on Instagram and we're scrolling through Twitter and stuff, and we're seeing these like 19-year-old millionaires and all sorts getting rich off crypto and YouTube and everything, I think we're constantly kind of very serious about becoming. I think the new trend is that becoming a millionaire. I feel like it's so
Like 18.
yeah, it's so attainable now through like technology and just the way the world works. And it's something I was discussing with my parents because they're obviously from a completely different generation, and they're like, why are young people so obsessed with becoming a millionaire now? Like we didn't even know the word million existed, and it just seemed like so far away, like to make £1 million. And I think it's all fair, it's great, like if you are able to tap into that, then by all means do so, but find joy in the every day-to-day things, like the walk to the post office, or when you're going to get a cup of coffee, or I think the in between moments as well, where nothing is happening, nothing bad's happening, nothing good is happening, you're just watching TV or you're ordering something off the menu, to acknowledge those moments and to kind of count them as your joyful moments of you living. And to not always be so obsessed with the final end goal or the destination, but again, cliche, but to enjoy the ride, because before you know it, like it's done, it's over. You're not always going to be on that roller coaster, Alexa, I promise. It will stop soon.
What's like a key takeaway or like thing from you, Alexa? I've got my pen ready. I'm going to write what you say down.
Oh my goodness. My key takeaway that I can't stress enough is allowing yourself to be vulnerable, giving yourself that space of vulnerability. Because the moment, at least for me, I can't speak for everyone, but at least for me, the moment that I allowed myself to be a bit more vulnerable was when the world opened up for me.
Yes. That is
Wow.
such an important one, especially in
Absolutely.
this kind of space, because you feel like you're not supposed to be. But first and foremost, we are human. And I think what you just said is so important, because we will all connect on that.
Yeah. And if you're having any second thoughts about it, because for whatever reason you may feel like you're not ready, or you may feel like you're not protected, I guess, because at times some people just don't feel safe enough to be vulnerable. I would say that I promise you there's an army out there. There's an army out there who will back you up, and that do embrace vulnerability.
Yes.
And I remember one of the words I told Amna during our discussion was like, if once this episode goes on and whatever comes about, feel free to ask me questions, and this is a safe space, because I do not play that. I told her, I was like, I am a warrior. I make sure that like my space is protected, and that like, yeah, I allow for anyone to have the freedom of expression or critical thinking. However, I think there's always like a line, of where I don't allow certain things. So that was like very major for me, to let my guests know, and I hope it conveys and you guys can.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's so huge, because for the long time, like I'm not that comfortable being vulnerable, and I have to feel very, very safe. So I completely understand what you mean about making people feel that. Not everybody's ready and okay with that. So if it helps, I felt completely comfortable, which is testament to you and the space that you've created with this. And that's not always easy to do. So thank you for creating that space.
Yeah, and I definitely also try to be as transparent as possible about where my shortcomings are still, where I'm still learning, right? Where I'm still pacing myself. Because at times you will realize as you engage more and more with people, and now that we're going back to normalcy, I guess, whatever normal things for anyone, and you're engaging once again more with your friends and things like that, you start learning about some of the things that they're vulnerable about, or whatever it may be. For example, I found out recently that some of my friends are having panic attacks or social anxiety around certain things. And for me, I'm like, huh, I don't get it. You know, like I was like, please help me learn more, and like being honest about like, hey, please like let me know, educate me more on like what that looks like. Cause I don't have, like, I'm not there yet. Like I don't understand. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, but
Definitely.
learning.
That's so beautiful. I think transparency and vulnerability are just completely up there for me as qualities and traits to have, especially on a leadership journey. For so long, you're constantly like putting on different masks to fit in different places. And I think that transparency and vulnerability, especially for our age group as well, is very important with the social media things going on out there, the different types of pressures there are to look a certain way, to have a filtered emotional state or a filtered physical state is quite problematic. And I think again, transparency and vulnerability, definite key things to have.
Well, ladies, we're ready to wrap it up.
This has been amazing.
It really has.
It really just has. And I always love to say thank you, and remember that your soul is golden.
Oh, that's such a lovely way to end it. Thank
I
you
love
so
that.
much for having us. This has definitely been my favorite podcast
Yeah, me too.
that I've been on. So thank you so much for creating it, and of course for having us.
No, thank you. All right, we're wrapping it out.